Okay, now our last speaker is Randy Krim. Randy began his career here in Lake Jackson in 1987 as a reserve police officer. From there, beginning in August of '88, he served as a patrol officer and worked his way through to detective sergeant for the Lake Jackson Police Department. In October of 2003, he was hired by the city of Lake Jackson as the director and fire marshal for our city. He serves as the city liaison for the Lake Jackson Fire Department and the Lake Jackson Emergency Medical Services. It would take me all night to read all of the things that he has done, the training, the classes, all of that. I asked for a brief bio and I got 3 pages. So, I'm just going to give you the ones that were most impressive. He is a certified arson and fire investigator. In 2011, he won the Texas Fire Marshals Association Roscoe Gibson Award, the American Fire Sprinkler Association Fire Sprinklers Save Lives Award, and the biggest one of all was the Lake Jackson Fire Department Milton Decker Memorial Firefighter of the Year. Maybe. I'm sorry.
All right, good evening. I'm not as prepared as the other ones. I don't have a PowerPoint because this is oral history. I don't want you to read it. Okay, so the fire marshal's office has always been a part of the fire department, but in 1953 it became an office of the fire marshal, and February 9th of 1953 it became the fire marshal's office. And I'm getting older, so I need to put my glasses on. So this is how it started off. The office of the fire marshal is hereby created, so this office shall be independent of other city departments. The fire marshal reporting directly to the mayor and city council. Such office shall be filled by appointment by the mayor, by and with the consent of city council, after the passage and approval of this ordinance. The said fire marshal shall be properly qualified for the duties of his office and shall be removed only for cause. His compensation for services shall be set by city council. And since then, the fire marshal's office is under the direction of the city manager, Mr. Yenny. That changed in 2003. There's a lot more to the ordinance that gives the duties and what the fire marshal is supposed to do. But in a nutshell, I just wanted to let you know, it was 10 years later that the office was actually created. As we talked about, Mr. Israel, he was hired as the fire marshal in 1977, but he was also the fire chief. He retired from the fire department and the city in 1996. At that time, Mr. Jerry Wolford was hired. He came from the police department side also, and he was fire marshal until 2003 when I took over as the fire marshal. In 1953, the very first fire marshal was J.S. Brown. He was not paid at that time. There were several more fire marshals that were not paid, but volunteer positions, and some that were assistant fire marshals. Andy was an assistant fire marshal at one time. So in 1954, Cecil Williams was the fire marshal. 1965, Mr. Harville was assistant fire marshal. 1966, Clarence Forsay, I believe. He resigned as fire marshal, and we weren't sure exactly when he was appointed. Mr. Richards was hired in 66. Norman Woods was assistant fire marshal in 67. And then became fire marshal in 1970. Elvin Campbell and Bobby Rouse were assistant fire marshals. And in 1972, Mr. Rouse became the fire marshal. Mr. McBride in 1973 became fire marshal, and assistant at that time was Mr. Taylor and Flighter. Do you know him, Andy? I don't know how to pronounce his name.
Flighter.
Okay, in 74, Mr. Jim Dunlap, he was also with the police department for several years, was a captain and assistant chief when he retired. 1975 was when Andy was appointed as an assistant fire marshal. And I've already spoke about Paul and Jerry and why I came about. Okay, as Mike pointed out, you don't have it up there. Our duties are sometimes, we get the question several times about, okay, what's the difference between the fire marshal and the fire chief? Mike explained a little bit about his side of the road, and his is under the fire suppression umbrella. Mine is the fire investigation, the fire inspections, the public education. Andy talked a little bit about what Paul used to do in the old days with the presentation that Lake Jackson became infamous for at A&M. And now we changed that a little bit. In 2003, when I first became fire marshal, the first thing I did is apply for a grant. 3 years later, I finally got that grant. We have a fire safety house that's sitting out there in the bays. We use that now to take to all the schools. We just finished up every school in BISD, not including just Lake Jackson, but Jones Creek, Freeport, Clute, Richwood. We go to all the kindergartens, and we see about 2,000 kids in a week's time. So it's just a different approach. You know, it's a hands-on approach for the kids, and it works out really well. The other thing we do on my side is the fire inspections. Some of you may have a business in town or know somebody that has a business. If you do operate a business in town, you're probably going to see me because we have to do an annual fire inspection. If you have a new business that's opening, we have to do fire inspections prior to that business opening. We do pre-plans with the cities, other city departments to be sure that we're covering all the aspects of the fire side to make sure we have fire hydrants and the right type of suppression systems such in the buildings. 2003, we started the International Code Council rules. We adopted these codes because we had codes, the Southern Building Codes and the Uniform Building Codes, that were kind of combined. In 2000, they started the International Code Council, which was kind of a combination of the two. And so in 2003, the city adopted the first codes under the International Code Council, and that's what we are currently under, the International Fire Code and Building Codes and Residential Codes. So if you are building something out, or you have a building that needs inspections, that's the rules that we go by. And that's pretty much it for my side of the road. If you want to start questions, I'm here.
Well, I have one more real quick thing I want to say. I was so worried about getting the speakers and the importance of the fire department, and I forgot behind every man is a good woman. And years ago, we had an organized fire department auxiliary. We organized in 1958. I became a member of the fire department wives group when I married Paul in 57. And so they had a group of women that met monthly at the fire station, the old fire station. And the first, we got married in December, so in January he said, "Are you going to the auxiliary meeting tonight?" And I said, "Well, I hadn't really planned on it." And he said, "Well, you're the chief's wife. You really ought to go." So I went. So here's this lovely group of ladies, and they had refreshments, and they played bunco. And if you know anything about bunco, if you have a really, really excited group, you go home with blinding headache and claw marks from here to here. And I went home and I thought, whew. So the next month, kind of played it low, Tuesday night, "Are you going to auxiliary?" "Well, I hadn't really planned on it." "Now, you're the chief's wife, Mary Helen, you need to go." So I went, and I came home the same way, blinding it, I'm not a bunco player. Anyway, so a couple of other ladies and I, Joanne Force for one, and Eileen Harville and Eileen Pensick, and most of these ladies are no longer with us. But we kind of got to talking, and we thought, we really need to do something besides this. We need to have a group and support the fire department. So we formed an auxiliary sometime during that year, 1958. And Joanne Force was elected as our first president. And when I thought about this, she is out of town right now, so I would have asked her to come. But there's not really anybody left that was part of that very first group but Joanne and myself and Aline Harville. Everyone else that was in that first group has passed away because we were very young then and they were already more mature ladies. Anyway, we did organize, and we met once a month, and we had refreshments, and we conducted business meetings, and we planned regular family activities. We had lots of fun. We had an annual ice cream party, and we had an annual family Christmas party, and Santa Claus usually came to the parties, the Christmas party. And we did several fundraisers to try to support the fire department. The two that I remember the best and had the most fun, we made 2 different times. We made fireman's hat quilts, and we raffled them off. And that was a lot of fun. It was a big time. But we did tried a lot of different things that some were successful, some weren't. But anyway, when we opened the new fire station in 1965, the auxiliary had enough money, and we purchased dishes and cooking utensils and the silverware, the flatware, because we had a nice big kitchen upstairs, and so we would get together and have our meals up there, and we also prepared food for the firemen. If they had a bad fire that went in the middle of the night, we'd come up and have breakfast for them when they came down. And we had coolers, and we had ice and water, and we collected old towels, and we'd go to the scene of the fire and help them, cool off and things like that. And we'd pat myself on the back for the whole group. We did a great job for a long time. But sometime in the early 90s, the lack of interest from the younger women there were only 5 or 6 of us left, and by then we were getting older and we were getting tired, so we just voted to disband. And it was a hard thing to do. It was really a hard thing to do, but we did, and now there is a support group. I'm not sure I don't know very much about it, but there is a support group that does things similar to that, I'm assuming, for the fire departments. But I just wanted to be sure that you knew that, as the old saying goes, behind every man or every man's group, there's a good woman or a good woman's group to support them. Okay, now, we'll be open for questions if you all have any questions that you'd like to ask. And then Mike assures me that you can have a tour of the fire station if you haven't done that. And I want to thank you, before you get into that, so much for coming to the program tonight. It's a small group, but there's lots of stuff going on. And it's been exciting for me to be able to do this year, and especially this one. So I'm going to put together some punch and cookies around the corner while y'all are doing your question and answer, okay? Thank you so much.